because it was only on Tuesday that we saw her carrying out one of her key constitutional roles, welcoming her 15th Prime Minister. And yet now we are mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth II. I think she was so determined to carry out those public duties right until the very end. And we've seen that over the last 12 months. Yes, things had to be adjusted and changed, and plans had to be changed to accommodate the fact that she was having mobility issues. But when she could, she knew and she felt that she must be seen by. She loved meeting people. She was always able to have this remarkable ability to put people at ease. But I think, as he said, it was from around lunchtime that concern certainly started to build, because it was highly unusual for the palace to decide to share information about the Queen's medical condition. Around 12:30, they told us that the Queen's doctors were concerned for her health and had recommended that she remain under medical supervision. And at the time, we were thinking, well, was it because Tuesday was too much? She was too busy. But clearly, for whatever reason, there was a swift decline over the last 48 hours as she remained in a place that she loved, Balmoral, her summer retreat, where year after year she was always surrounded by her family. And that was precisely the case this afternoon. The palace, on announcing that the medical household were concerned about her, also, again, made the unusual step of announcing that her family were heading there, including the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. The Prince of Wales, who is now our king. We have just had a statement through from His Majesty the King at the time of the Queen's death, and I can read that to you now. In it, he says, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held." So there is the first statement that we had from the new king, maybe King Charles. It is his decision whether or not he chooses a new regnal name, but they're paying a very heartfelt tribute to, as he describes, my beloved mother, but explaining how the family will take great comfort in the knowledge of how the country, the Commonwealth, felt about her, the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held.
Rhiannon, many thanks. Rhiannon Mills, our royal correspondent there. Let's just to alert you to what we're expecting to see in Downing Street in a short time. The lectern where announcements are made has been erected just outside number 10, where the new Prime Minister, just a couple of days into the job, Liz Truss, is expected to make a statement to the nation about the passing of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. That statement, very short, that the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon, and we know that she was surrounded by the closest members of her family. All four of her children travelled up to Balmoral, or were in Scotland, to be at her side in her last few hours. We understand, and you heard there from the statement read out by Rhiannon, that the King and the Queen Consort, deeply saddened, will remain at Balmoral this evening. Charles with his mother, and will return to London tomorrow. It, of course, comes just 2 days since that lectern was used by Liz Truss to address the nation on becoming the new Prime Minister. Let's listen to the Prime Minister.
We are all devastated by the news that we have just heard from Balmoral. The death of Her Majesty the Queen is a huge shock to the nation and to the world. Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world. We are now a modern, thriving, dynamic nation. Through thick and thin, Queen Elizabeth II provided us with the stability and the strength that we needed. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. Her life of service stretched beyond most of our living memories. In return, she was loved and admired by the people in the United Kingdom and all around the world. She has been a personal inspiration to me and to many Britons. Her devotion to duty is an example to us all. Earlier this week, at 96, she remained determined to carry out her duties as she appointed me as her 15th Prime Minister. Throughout her life, she's visited more than 100 countries, and she has touched the lives of millions around the world. In the difficult days ahead, we will come together with our friends across the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and the world to celebrate her extraordinary lifetime of service. It is a day of great loss, but Queen Elizabeth II leaves a great legacy. Today, the crown passes, as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty, King Charles III. With the King's family, we mourn the loss of his mother, and as we mourn, we must come together as a people to support him, to help him bear the awesome responsibility that he now carries for us all. We offer him our loyalty and devotion, just as his mother devoted so much to so many for so long. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
Prime Minister Liz Truss there, ending her statement, saying, "God save the King." Liz Truss there reflecting that it was just 2 days ago that she had been to Balmoral to be received by Her Majesty and asked to form a government, asked to become her 15th Prime Minister. That's the last image we have of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, whose death was announced today. Liz Truss also spoke for the nation when she talked of the devastation, the shock that we all feel. She said that Queen Elizabeth, who spanned 70 years on the throne, was the monarch that the vast majority of citizens of the United Kingdom ever knew. The rock, Liz Truss said, on which modern Britain was built. The Prime Minister described Queen Elizabeth as the very spirit of Great Britain and said that spirit will endure. And she also reflected on, as we all will be over the next few weeks, months, and many, many years to come, on Her Majesty's devotion to duty. To the end, her life was devoted to service, to carrying out her duties as the monarch, the longest serving monarch in the history of Great Britain and the United Kingdom. This had platinum year. Well, I believe now I can bring you the statement from the King, His Majesty the King. Charles has said at the time of the Queen's death, he said, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of great sadness for me and all members of my family." He continued, "We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world." King Charles continued, "During the period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held." That from the King, as Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, referred to him as King Charles III. Let's talk to our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills. And the issue, I know it's a minor issue at this time, Rhiannon, in some of the great scheme of things, the issue of the regnal name still not necessarily decided.
No, it's not entirely clear, and we did hear Liz Truss there referring to the new king as King Charles III, but, and this might come as a surprise to some, there is a possibility that he could use one of his other names, as we have seen from other past sovereigns. So we wait for official confirmation on the name that he will definitely go by, and I think that is also going to be the case when it comes to what we see unfold over the next 10 days or so. We have already seen some of the formalities that we would have anticipated. So, for example, the Union flags flying at half-mast. We've also seen the announcement being put on the gates there, announcing the sad passing of Queen Elizabeth II. But we wait to see exactly how the next few days will pan out. But what we can see is that already the transition has seamlessly happened. And I think for some that will compound the shock. It's hard to take in some ways already, the fact that we are talking about the passing of a much loved head of state after only seeing her a couple of days ago carrying out her duties. But also now we do have a new monarch, and already he wanted to make sure that he was able to send this message to people across the country and the Commonwealth. And it's a very warm message where he talks about the death of his beloved mother and how the love and respect with which she was held across the country is really going to comfort and sustain the rest of the family. But in the coming days, we will see this transition happen seamlessly in terms of his succession being officially confirmed at the Accession Council. Interestingly, also within the message explaining and announcing her death, it talked about how the King and the Queen Consort will travel to London. And that was something that the Queen very clearly expressed in her Accession Day message, at the start of the year when it came to, I think, trying to future-proof the monarchy, to try and stop the unnecessary questions that some may think were unnecessary on the event of her death. And one of those was going to be how the Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, should be referred to. Because you have to remember that when the Prince of Wales and Camilla got married, it was expressed that she would become Princess Consort at the time, because there was a sensitivity, of course, around that relationship. In the Queen's Accession Day message this year, she very clearly showed her support and affection for Camilla, saying she should be a future Queen Consort. She appreciated how much of a support Camilla is and will continue to be, especially in the coming days and weeks, for her son as he takes over this role. So already we see in what's happening now the impact that Queen Elizabeth II had when it came to continuing to shape how the future of the monarchy is going to look.
Rhiannon, many thanks. Let's cross now to our political editor, Beth Rigby. Beth, we just heard a statement from the Prime Minister, and what a day, what a week it has been for Liz Truss. Just became Prime Minister, just unveiled a major economic plan, and now speaking for the nation about her sadness, her devastation about the death of Queen Elizabeth.
Yes, Donna, this is a Prime Minister who has been in the post for about 2 days and actually only was with the Queen a couple of days ago now, barely into number 10, having to come out and try and somehow speak for the nation and to the nation about the loss of Her Majesty the Queen. She gave a speech, I think, that was in 3 parts, really. The first, in which she spoke of the devastation of the loss of the Queen. She said that the Queen was the rock on which modern Britain was built, that she had been there for all of us through thick and thin as our nation, our post-war nation, grew and evolved. The constant always was the Queen. She talked of her devotion to service. So an acknowledgement and an attempt to try and encapsulate that extraordinary reign of Queen Elizabeth. She then went on to talk a bit about her personal reflections, talking about how the Queen had been a personal inspiration to her as well as many Britons, talking about that meeting. We saw those lovely pictures of them together about 2 days past, of that meeting with the Queen, where Liz Truss spoke about how Queen Elizabeth still showed that devotion to duty. And then she moved on to the final section, in which she said that it was a time to come together and mourn the loss of the Queen with family and friends, but also to look forward to the continuation of the monarchy. And she spoke about a nation needing to come together to support Prince Charles III as he ascends to being the king. And she said that we offer him our loyalty and devotion. She said, with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era, ending that speech, God save the King.
Beth, many thanks. Beth Rigby, our political editor there. Let's go to my colleague Mark Austin, who's in Balmoral, where the Queen's death was announced, and where the senior members of the royal family have gathered and are there this evening.
Yes, good evening from Balmoral, where this evening the Queen is at peace. She is surrounded by Prince Charles, King Charles, now Princess Anne, Prince Edward, Prince Andrew, also Prince William is here, and we're told that Prince Harry is on his way now from Aberdeen Airport to here in Balmoral. There were well-wishers here, but once the announcement came, the police slowly, very politely asked them to leave. The roads are closing to anything other than traffic relating to the royals, and it is just very quiet, incredibly quiet. It is the saddest of evenings here, because this was a place that she truly loved. The people here loved her. She loved being here. The statement said she died peacefully. This was a place she was often living peacefully. She loved the peace of this place. She loved the countryside here. She loved the fresh air, and she loved the one commitment that she had here, which was the Braemar Highland Games, and she enjoyed the culture of the place, and she just loved being here. So it is an enormous sadness this evening to people here, but of course to people right across this country. And I think I mentioned that King Charles, the princes and princesses are here. But it's worth remembering that they are also sons and daughters and grandchildren. And this is an evening when, you know, our thoughts, the country's thoughts, will obviously be with them. And but in so many ways, the Queen, of course, was also a mother and grandmother to the whole nation. So this is just the saddest evening. With me is our Scotland correspondent, James Matthews, who spent, well, you've been up here quite often, haven't you, when the Queen has been in residence. It is a place that she loves.
She does. And it's a place where she would have been comfortable spending her final days. And I think we can draw comfort from what we know of her final days. I've spoken to people who saw her in recent weeks, and she was very much a woman of the land out here, getting out, enjoying the rolling countryside around her. She was seen walking her corgis, picnicking with a lady in waiting in her mother's fishing hut on the banks of the River Dee, having lunch in Glenmick, where she has a cottage, which had been refurbished in a way that was appropriate to her reduced mobility in her final days. She liked this place. Her family liked this place. They enjoyed being together as a family in good times and in bad. You know, we stand here in a place where 25 years ago the family were located when Princess Diana died. We saw the pictures of Prince William driving his uncle, Prince Andrew, Sophie and Edward into Balmoral about an hour and a half ago. That face of grief on Prince William's face was similar to the look of grief I saw on the child Prince William when his mother died. When we watched Prince William and Harry walk this road, looking at floral tributes to their mother. Tonight they will be reunited again. Harry has landed at Aberdeen Airport. We expect him to arrive here within some 15-20 minutes. It's a time for the family to come together. They have lost a mother and a grandmother. They will come together in grief, in comfort, and in warmth, in a place where they know comfort and warmth and family.
We will be together tonight, and as you say, Harry is expected to arrive any moment now. But let's just talk about the coming hours and the coming days. We know, because of the statement, that King Charles, the Queen Consort, will be on their way back to London pretty shortly. They'll be back, we're told, tomorrow. But what about the body of Her Majesty the Queen?
There will be a period of national mourning. I mean, there has been a plan in place for some considerable time, possibly to be fine-tuned now that we are where we are. But the King and his Queen Consort, as you say, will travel back to London tomorrow. They will visit all, or the King will visit all 4 home nations. There will be that period of national mourning up until the funeral. In terms of the Queen's body, it will remain here for now, but that will be moved to St Giles Cathedral, just off the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, and thereafter to Buckingham Palace.
Okay, James, thank you very much indeed. And indeed, the body will be taken first to Holyrood House, I think, and then along the Royal Mile to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. And then the plan is for the Queen's body to be transported by train. The Royal Train will take the Queen from Waverley Station down to London. But as I say, at the moment, the family, most of the family have gathered. Prince Harry is on his way, Dermot, and here at Balmoral, just a sense of overwhelming sadness.
Mark, indeed, and that is reflected here at Buckingham Palace. There is no doubt that this is a major moment in the history of our United Kingdom, indeed in the history of the world. Such a long-serving and influential monarch passing after 70 years on the throne. I just wonder if we can take in some of the scenes here of the crowds gathering at Buckingham Palace, because they are flooding in here to absorb the enormity of what has just happened here today. Thousands of people now. When I first arrived here during the course of the afternoon, there was that brief statement from Buckingham Palace about the deterioration in the Queen's health, and that her doctors were concerned about her, but she was remaining at Balmoral as those members of the royal family gathered to be at her side. Well, then the sad news came at about 6:30 this evening, and since then, the crowds are flooding in, as you can see there, quietly absorbing the situation, quietly, I imagine, paying their respect as well, and taking in the symbolism of what that flag flying at half-mast tells us, right slap bang in the centre of the roof of Buckingham Palace, fluttering in the light breeze of a rather gloomy September day, reflecting the mood of so many people here. And behind me in Green Park, which butts Buckingham Palace, hundreds of people making their way down to take in the scenes, to say that they came to Buckingham Palace to see for themselves, to read for themselves the short formal statement which is posted on the gates of royal palaces on the major occasions, and there's none more major than this, the simple statement saying, as Her Majesty would have wished, I'm sure, that the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon, posted up there on the gates. And the King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. And Rhiannon Mills, our royal correspondent, joins me. And Rhiannon, I'm sure you're taking in these scenes as well. It is quite something just seeing the people silently, respectfully, just wanting to somehow be part of this, to say that they were present at the passing of a monarch, a much loved monarch, the longest reigning monarch, well, not just in our history, but in just about every country in the world's history. I know there are a few that served a little bit longer. Quite extraordinary scenes, Rhiannon.
Yeah, and I think it's important to stress that her age, 96 years old, a remarkable age to live until, but it shouldn't detract from the enormity of this moment. Most of us can't remember a time when she wasn't Queen, and she was a woman who was recognised not just in this country, but right around the world, and held in such high esteem and respect by members of the public, politicians, religious leaders. Everywhere she went, crowds would come out to see her. And what is wonderful is when you look back at footage from those early days of her reign, where literally hundreds of thousands of people would come out onto the streets to see this glamorous young queen and her handsome Prince Philip alongside her. And yes, her look and her demeanour, and the world changed during her 7 decades as Queen. And yet, largely, it was deemed that she never put a foot wrong. And I think also when you consider public figures that we see today, it's often about their brand, it's about them, it's about their personality. And yet, one person once said that the Queen, she had the conviction to be boring. She wanted to keep herself private at times. It wasn't about her, it was about her role. I think we will see a couple of things play out over the next couple of days. Of course, huge constitutional change. Some may describe it as a constitutional earthquake as we feel the reverberations of what has happened. We now automatically have a new king, and it's literally been confirmed in the last few moments that the new king will be known as King Charles III. Now, at home, you might be thinking, well, of course he would be. But actually, when it comes to a change in reign, the new sovereign is able to choose a different name. And of course, we've seen that throughout history. So instead of being King Charles, he could have chosen any of his other names, which are Philip, Arthur, or George. However, we now know that he will be King Charles III. He also takes on other titles, so head of the Commonwealth, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Supreme Governor of the Church of England. So we have the constitutional change, we have the change in head of state, but I think what we're also going to see, and I think you're already probably seeing there at Buckingham Palace, you will have a greater sense of this, is a sense that people want to come together, a collective sense of shock and mourning. It was, after all, only 2 days ago that we saw her still carrying out her constitutional duties. And as Liz Truss said in her speech, there are going to be difficult days ahead where communities will come together, just as we have done right throughout her reign to mark those milestone moments, to pay our respects to what was a life devoted to service.
Indeed, Rhiannon, thank you for that. And I would echo those thoughts in terms of what people here are coming to witness and to experience. There's a huge sense, obviously and clearly, of the end of an era, but also a little bit of trepidation about what lies ahead. We know that we are in very difficult times, both nationally and internationally, and at this very moment, the rock, as Liz Truss referred to it, the very spirit of Great Britain, the rock upon which modern Britain was built, has passed. And in just one short week, we have had the changing of a Prime Minister, and now the passing of our longest serving head of state, the rock upon which Britain was built. Alistair Bruce, our royal commentator, joins me now. And Alistair, just on that confirmation now that the King will be King Charles III, and Camilla, Queen Consort.
Yes, it's a moment of continuity and a moment of great sadness. I think for a nation recognising that the Queen is now dead, it must be a great shock for the new king that instantaneously, while he fathoms the loss of his mother, there will be red boxes to be dealt with. There will be the work that the Queen didn't quite finish yesterday. And he must now continue the function of government as head of state.
Hi guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. You can clearly see today we are in black because we are mourning the Queen of England for her sudden passing. If you are any part of the world, the black community, the Commonwealth community, wherever you are around the world, can you join me to celebrate the life of the Queen? Can we put our heads together, say a minute of prayer for her hard work, dedication, for serving her country, her people, and for accommodating all who have migrated from places of difficulties or those who have come um, in search of work, and those who have come here in search of better education, or whatever reason they've migrated in this country and been welcome there. We appreciate the nation. So if you can join us to celebrate her life and celebrate all the good deeds she has done for the Commonwealth, and we pray for new leadership that would be coming, as is clearly said. King Charles is now head leading the throne, and we are hoping that he is going to bring the best leadership and will also be given the respect that her mother has earned across the years. And it's just incredible how much work and how much leadership she has carried in her shoulder for the last 70 years. So that's 7 decades. And saying that she has crowned, or she has put in power 15 different prime ministers, varying within the age gap of within 100 years age gap. So that's how much work she has done. The first places she ever visited when she was queen was the Gold Coast in Ghana. She has traveled the world. She looked after the underprivileged. She looked after lots of children in need. She's supported everyone and everywhere around the world with the best possible way that she could. And she remained in office, and she even served office right up to the last week of her parting, which we saw last week, where she uh, handed the prime ministerial office to Liz Truss, who is now the current prime minister of England. If for those who are around the world, who for the children who are also learning for history, today is the 8th of September 2002, and this is the day where the royal family of the United Kingdom announced the passing of the Queen 2 days after putting Liz Truss in power as the Prime Minister of England. I would move you from the Sky News where we were watching live, so you can also continue viewing this on BBC, which is the British Broadcasting Centre, who will continue to go through with you live with the life that our Queen has lived, and they're currently showing a live stream at the Buckingham Palace, where the British people or the royal family followers are now gathered to show their respect to our Queen. Again, we all in black, and we are mourning the Queen of England. If you can join us, and if you can celebrate the life of the Queen with us. She was 96 when she passed, celebrated her Golden Jubilee, 70 years of hard work in power this year. And from the Black community, we say she has been loved, she has been cherished, she's been respected. We are all in tears and saying that may God rest her soul, and may God bless the new king.
Someone who personified simple qualities, who encouraged politicians to be the best that they could be, to encourage all of us to be the best of ourselves, because she did what is old-fashioned concerts, and she did that for decade after decade, and she was that most important thing for a monarch. She was someone who unified people. She brought people together. And the challenge for Charles now will be to continue to seek to do the same particularly at this moment when there are pressures within the United Kingdom against unity. And so Charles, I think, will be very much aware of the challenges that he faces and the task that he must now begin.
Well, Charles's younger son, Harry, is, we understand, arriving at Balmoral just about now. I think we're expecting the arrival in a few minutes. Here we are, the entrance to the Balmoral estate, but the Duke of Sussex, who's travelling alone, we believe, because his wife, Meghan, is not accompanying him, but he's arriving. He didn't come with the main royal party earlier, with the Duke of Cambridge, his brother, and with Prince Andrew and with Prince Edward and the Countess of Wessex. He wasn't with that group. They flew up to Aberdeen quite a few hours ago, and they've been in Balmoral since then. They joined the Princess Royal and the Prince of Wales, who were already there at the Queen's side. So Prince Harry's arrival is considerably later than that. And indeed, it's quite a while after the official announcement of the Queen's death at the age of 96. But we understand that the Duke of Sussex, Harry, is on his way there, and he's about to arrive at Balmoral at this time, where he will join the other members of the royal family. And as we've already heard, the King Charles III and the Queen Consort, they will be staying at Balmoral tonight. They're not returning to London tonight. We had that statement earlier from the King. And they will be returning to London tomorrow. We've also heard from the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who paid her tribute to the Queen and thanked her for a lifetime of service, and reflected indeed the great sense of national sadness at the news that came today, because although the Queen was 96 and had health problems, these images will tell you everything about recent years, where of course she's really just done her best to carry on despite advancing years and health problems. And she and Prince Philip, who left us 2 years ago, were full of the joys during those Jubilee celebrations. And now we have some of the tributes already arriving. And they'll be arriving, of course, at Balmoral. They'll be arriving at Buckingham Palace. They'll be arriving at Windsor. So these will be local people who are used to the royal presence in Balmoral. They're very used to seeing the royal family around in these summer months. They know full well how fond the Queen was of Balmoral as a home and as a base. And they will be wanting to pay their respects as locals who tended to leave the royal family alone because they were used to seeing them around. And the Queen certainly felt very much at home there, having spent so many years there with her family and indeed with her parents when she was growing up. So sometime along this road, we're expecting Prince Harry to arrive. It's going to be in probably one of those vehicles that we saw earlier, maybe a Range Rover or something of that kind, but they're still expecting his arrival there. And he will, of course, join the rest of the family, and they will no doubt be reflecting on the loss that they've suffered. They'll be sharing the sense of grief, and they'll be thinking as well about what the future holds with the new king, King Charles III. As Clarence House has confirmed, he wishes to be known King Charles III, who will be reigning with his Queen Consort Camilla, and thoughts already will be turning respectfully, sensibly but respectfully, towards the events of the next few days, leading, of course, to the state funeral for Queen Elizabeth, which will take place in probably 10 days' time, but we need to have that confirmed. The plans, of course, have been there for a long time. They always are. They've been revised over the years because that's how these things work. But they will need to be finalised given these circumstances because, of course, the Queen has passed away at Balmoral in Scotland and not at Windsor, not at Buckingham Palace. So the arrangements will inevitably be adjusted in the next few days and the lead up to the state funeral itself. So there'll be some talk about that, and it's fine for us to talk a little bit about that. But what we're really doing today is reflecting on people's sense of loss and what's happened today, and the fact that British life has changed, the fact that the course of our history has changed, and that is symbolised by Buckingham Palace and that empty balcony tonight, where the Queen has appeared on so many occasions, on so many happy occasions indeed, during Jubilees and the end of the Second World War with her beloved father and mother and sister Margaret. So it's been the scene of so many great national events when the crowds congregate around that palace to declare their support for the royal family, or indeed to express their sympathy in bad times. And the crowds are now building up. The news, which came a short while ago, clearly filtering through, and lots of people now wanting to just stand at the palace, look at the palace, want to be seen at the palace to express their sense of loss and to express their sense of sympathy with the royal family, with King Charles on the loss of his mother, and of course with the Duke of York and the Earl of Wessex and the Princess Royal, who've also lost a mother, and the Duke of Cambridge, who's lost his grandmother, as has the Duke of Sussex, who's on his way to Balmoral. Of course, a grandmother and a great-grandmother too. So there's generations of the royal family affected by the news today. That's before you start thinking about friends of the royal family and about generations of people in the UK who've known nothing else. You'd have to be in your 80s, basically, to be in any position to say that you could perhaps remember a time when the Queen wasn't sovereign, wasn't the monarch. And here we have dusk in London and the Queen Victoria Memorial glinting in the evening light, with the crowds gathering around that memorial and congregating at the gates and the railings of Buckingham Palace. The palace, which is, of course, the symbol of the royal family in central London, but is not the usual residence of the royal family. That is Windsor Castle, which is usually a short ride away in a helicopter or indeed a car. And the Queen used to be very familiar with that journey, being ferried back and forth from Windsor to Buckingham Palace for the business of the day. And then, of course, Buckingham Palace, the great backdrop for so many of the huge ceremonial and state events that we are familiar with. And they include the Queen's birthday parade, which will become the King's birthday parade when that next happens, and that famous processional route along the Mall all the way to Horse Guards Parade, with the Queen until the mid-1980s was on horseback. She loved the horses, of course, as we know, not just riding, but also the horse racing, on that processional route for so many birthday parades, and indeed was in a position to enjoy the end of the parade in 2022 for the Platinum Jubilee. So many happy memories, and the crowds gathering are aware of them, but on a day when they're reflecting on a huge loss in our national life, the death of Queen Elizabeth II, who's died at the age of 96. I'm in a position to tell you what the leader of the opposition has been saying. Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has issued his own statement in the past half hour or so. We mourn the passing of a remarkable sovereign, says Sir Keir. It's a deep private loss for the royal family, and all our thoughts are with them at this time, and the nation shares in their grief. We will always treasure Queen Elizabeth II's life of service and devotion to our nation and the Commonwealth. Our longest serving and our greatest monarch, says Sir Keir. Above the clashes of politics, she stood not for what the nation fought over, but what it agreed upon. As Britain changed rapidly around her, this dedication became the still point of our turning world. So as our great Elizabethan era comes to an end, we will honour the late Queen's memory by keeping alive the values of public service that she embodied. For 70 years, Sir Keir Starmer says, Queen Elizabeth II stood as the head of our country. But in spirit, she stood amongst us. Yet another moving tribute from our leaders there, one from Boris Johnson earlier and Liz Truss, and this one from Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. There are others too, of course, from President Biden, President Obama, former President Trump, President Macron. All of these tributes coming in, all of them worth reading. They will no doubt be on the BBC News website for you to see, to just keep up with the tributes being paid, because they are moving, they're eloquent, and they are thoughtful. And it's well worth you having a look if you have a moment to do that. Now, you're watching BBC News, and this extended coverage continues this evening on the 8th of September 2022, because Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the longest serving monarch in the history of the United Kingdom, the commanding presence in British public life for a span of 8 decades. The flags have been lowered at Buckingham Palace. The Queen died at Balmoral Castle in Aberdeenshire at the age of 96. The Queen's eldest son, Charles, at the age of 73, has formally become King Charles III. And within the past few minutes, Buckingham Palace released this formal statement. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. And Charles, the new King, said this: "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held." It's coming up to 8 o'clock in the evening. The lights are on in central London. The flags have been lowered. The crowds are gathering around the memorial by Buckingham Palace. Nicholas Witchell, our royal correspondent, still with me. And up at Balmoral, we are in a position to say that Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, is either just about to arrive or has just arrived. He's certainly within minutes of arriving at Balmoral Castle itself. Some of the vehicles now pulling up, and they are the advanced vehicles, and there's the vehicle, the cavalcade, moving its way into Balmoral Castle itself, and we believe that is Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. And Nick, you're watching this with me, and that means that Harry has now joined his brother and his father and other members of the family.
Yes, as autumn descends on this bleak September day, there at Balmoral and also at Buckingham Palace, how striking are those images outside the palace, people feeling the need to come together at this moment in the nation's history, the day on which the Queen of the last 70 years has passed away. People need, I think, just to the solace, the comfort of being with other people. The nation will begin its mourning, bells will be rung and guns will be sounded and church services will come together. I remember the words that were used, I think, by a previous Archbishop of Canterbury, who talked about service untiringly done, duty faithfully fulfilled. Everyone will have their words about the reign, the duty of Elizabeth II, as we all just pay our tributes now to a life of duty, of humility, of decency, as the process, the transition now to this new reign gets underway. And I expect we will hear from the new king tomorrow. There will also, of course, be an accession council when the Privy Council comes together. Not the full Privy Council, because there simply isn't room these days, but they will come together and they will confirm the succession, and they will, I imagine, at some point hear from the new king. And those statements by him will be important to set the tone for his reign, paying tribute to his mother on behalf of his family and the nation, but also setting out his aspirations, his wish, his ambition to be a force for unity and continuity and stability at a time when stability perhaps is in rather shorter supply than it has been at many other times. It is unsettling, as Mark Easton said. It is disorientating, and many people will feel that, and they will need to be reassured at this moment.
Nick, thanks again. Nicholas Witchell, our royal correspondent, with some thoughts there on the significance of today and the loss that people have suffered today and the country has suffered, and the fact that we no longer have a queen. We have a king, King Charles III, who has acceded to the throne immediately, the moment that his mother passed away. Lots of tributes which we can still share with you from political leaders, from religious leaders. For example, the former Prime Minister, Theresa May, who saw the Queen so many times, of course, during her period as Prime Minister, simply said this: "I want to place on record," says Theresa May, "that Her Majesty devoted herself unreservedly to a life of service." And that really does echo what so many others have been saying. It's interesting as well that the Duke of Cambridge, the new title, the Duke of Cambridge, the Duchess of Cambridge, William and Kate, of course, now being referred to as the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall and Cambridge. So we'll see lots of these adjustments as the evening goes on. And here on BBC News, we will, of course, be bringing you more tributes from around the world and reflecting what people in communities across the United Kingdom are saying tonight after the death of the Queen. We'll take a pause for now. We'll be back for an extended edition of BBC News at 10, but we're going to join my colleague Clive Myrie now for more special coverage following the death of Her Majesty the Queen. Goodbye for now.
The longest reigning monarch in British history, Queen Elizabeth II, has died at the age of 96.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. God help me to make good my vow.
Over the course of 8 momentous decades, she witnessed social and economic change on a global scale. As Princess Elizabeth of York, she came to the throne at the age of 25, following the sudden death of her father, King George VI. During her lifelong reign, the Queen dealt with no fewer than 15 prime ministers, the first, Sir Winston Churchill, through to Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair and Boris Johnson. As head of the Commonwealth, she became the most travelled monarch in history, head of state of 15 countries at the end of her reign. The Queen's death comes just over a year after the passing of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, her consort for more than 70 years. Over the decades, the Queen was greeted by millions of people worldwide and met her subjects on thousands of engagements in the UK and well beyond. She was last pictured at Balmoral on Tuesday, asking Liz Truss to become Prime Minister. Now, as the crown passes to a new king, Charles III, the Queen's death will be deeply felt by her family, by people across the United Kingdom, and millions around the world. Good evening. The reign of the longest-serving monarch in the history of the United Kingdom has come to an end with the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Buckingham Palace made the announcement just after 6:30 this evening. The Queen, who was 96, passed away at Balmoral Castle in Aberdeenshire. Members of the royal family had made the journey there on the news she was gravely ill. The Queen had been a commanding presence in British public life for more than 8 decades, and her eldest son, Charles, at the age of 73, has now become King Charles III. Buckingham Palace had issued this statement: the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and Queen consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. Well, in the last hour, His Majesty King Charles III released this statement: the death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held. Well, joining me now is Nicholas Witchell, our royal correspondent. Nick, I am 58 years of age. I've known no other monarch. And there are millions of people, we'll show the pictures a little bit later on, millions of people around the country, thousands outside Buckingham Palace, some outside Balmoral as well. They have known no other monarch either. This is a moment of profound change as well as profound sadness.
It is. It's a massive moment for the country, and I think people are just taking it in, absorbing it, and I would imagine that many millions of people are very emotional about this. The tears will flow in many households tonight as they just take in the news that this figure who has been there throughout most of our lives, in the background to our lives. I'm nearly 70, and I too have only ever known Elizabeth II on the throne. But the transition will take place. We have a new king. The crown passes imperceptibly, invisibly, immediately. He doesn't have to be sworn in. There doesn't have to be any ceremony to ensure that he is the new monarch. He is, as soon as one monarch dies, the crown passes. There will be challenges for him, there is no doubt. Anyone succeeding to such a huge figure who has occupied the throne for so long would face quite a challenging time to take up and pick up the threads of the constitutional monarchy in this country. But I think that this nation is, at its heart, feels very comfortable with the monarchy. Not everybody does. There are many people, of course, who don't, but the overwhelming majority do. And I think that Charles will rely on those instincts and the efforts that he will make in coming days to reassure people that he will reign in the style of his mother. There will be some differences because each monarch has an element of their own personality. He will be, I think, slightly more proactive than she was. But that's all for the future, really. Tonight, millions of people in this country and around the world will be reflecting back and feeling a deep and profound sadness, will be just appreciating what it is that has been lost to the United Kingdom. The monarch who has been so dutiful, who has embodied all the best of qualities of tolerance and decency, who has stood for unity and constancy and continuity. That reign has ended. And it is a moment of great sadness and solemnity for the United Kingdom.
For the United Kingdom and indeed her own family. Nick, for now, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to our Scotland editor, James Cook, who is at Balmoral for us now. James, what can we say, really? Members of the family are there, and by Her Majesty's bedside when she passed away, we assume. Are all the immediate members of the family now with you?
Yes, the senior royals have all arrived here. Within the past half an hour or so, the sun, shrouded in cloud, set here on the Balmoral estate, setting too on the end of an era for the United Kingdom and for the world. And minutes after it did so, a car swept through the gates, several cars in fact, one of them we believe containing Prince Harry, to join his brother, Prince William, and his father, the King, in mourning for Queen Elizabeth, a monarch who has a special place in the heart of this nation, but who in return had, in her own words, a deep and abiding affection for Scotland. A moment, of course, here behind these gates for a family, first and foremost to mourn, but a moment too for a nation to reflect on an extraordinary reign and on the end, the severing of links with the Second World War, the existential threat to this country which this nation survived, and also to the British Empire, which in many ways the Queen embodied for some of her reign. She also, I think it is fair to say, embodied the union of the crowns between Scotland and England, that union dating all the way back to 1603.
James, thank you. Our Scotland editor there live at Balmoral. We can go now to Mark Easton, who is outside Buckingham Palace for us. Now, Mark, we were seeing a little bit earlier some of the pictures of the crowds gathered where you are, many of them having been there in the rain throughout much of the day on the news that the Queen was gravely ill, and now many more people have turned up on the news that she has now passed away.
Yes, absolutely, Clive. People are seeking some way of connecting with this extraordinary moment in British history, and despite the rain, which is really quite heavy now, there are tens of thousands of people outside Buckingham Palace. The crowd has been growing over the last few hours, people streaming down the Mall. In the Mall as well, we've got a line of black taxi cabs, the cabbies wanting to pay their tribute. It's a very respectful, very somber scene. You'll see quite a few camera lights are on, but I've also heard applause and even at one point 3 cheers. Now, we don't know whether those were moments where the crowd wanted to show their appreciation for the Queen that they had lost, or whether they were perhaps greeting their new king, King Charles III. But whichever, it is a crowd which wants to be part of this moment. And it is a huge moment, I think, Clive, for this country, because the Queen was this solid, immovable piece of the nation's architecture, the keystone. And without that, there will be a sense, I think, of unease, of uncertainty. And it is in a moment when people will want to come together, will want to be with others, to share this moment and to see it through.
Mark, thank you. Mark Easton there at Buckingham Palace this evening, where crowds have gathered and have been gathering throughout the day. If you are just joining us, Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the longest serving monarch in the history of the United Kingdom. and a commanding presence, of course, in British public life over 8 decades. Her Majesty died at Balmoral Castle in Aberdeenshire, and she was aged 96. The Queen's eldest son, Charles, at the age of 73, has now become king. Our royal correspondent, Daniela Ralph, now looks back on today's events.
Tuesday, the 6th of September, the last photographs of the Queen, 96 years old and still at work. Meeting the new Prime Minister at Balmoral, a duty she had been keen to fulfil, and one we now know was her final duty after 7 decades of public service. Around 4 o'clock this afternoon, a number of the Queen's family arrived at Aberdeen Airport. Her grandson, the Duke of Cambridge, was first to emerge, followed by her daughter-in-law, Sophie, the Countess of Wessex, and then her 2 youngest sons, Edward, the Earl of Wessex, and Andrew, the Duke of York. Prince William drove the family group to Balmoral to join his father, the Prince of Wales, Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, and Princess Anne, who were already there with the Queen. Within an hour and a half of their arrival came news from Buckingham Palace. As is tradition, the announcement of the Queen's death was attached to the palace gates by 2 footmen, as tributes began.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
And also from the Leader of the Opposition.
For the vast majority of us, the late Queen has been simply the Queen, the only Queen, above all else, our Queen. As we mourn her loss, we should also treasure her life, our longest serving and greatest ever monarch. Above the clashes of politics, she stood not for what the nation fought over, but what it agreed upon.
Throughout the day, there had been growing unease about the Queen's health. In the Commons, as Keir Starmer stood up to speak, opposite him, the Prime Minister was being told of the Queen's condition. Information passed to Angela Rayner, Labour's deputy leader, who left her seat for a while to discuss the development, before the Speaker of the House addressed the chamber.
I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen, and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment.
This in Berkshire. But these kind of visits had become rare over the past year, as the Queen relied on her walking stick, her mobility compromised. The royal household had tried to adapt to keep her active and visible. A golf buggy at the Chelsea Flower Show helped keep the Queen comfortable. But she had become noticeably thinner and frailer, something that severely limited her involvement in her own Platinum Jubilee celebrations, with her family increasingly representing her. At the weekend, her son stood in at the Braemar Highland Games, always a favourite event for the Queen that she reluctantly missed. Like so much of her life, the decline in her health was played out in public. Duty may have got harder to manage physically, but mentally, even emotionally, the Queen remained engaged and working to the very end.
Daniela Ralph with a sum up there of the events of the day. We're now joined by the former Conservative Prime Minister, Sir John Major. Sir John, it's very good of you to join us here on BBC News at this moment in time. Fears, of course, had been mounting throughout the day on the news from the Queen's medical team at Balmoral. What are your thoughts now on the passing of Her Majesty?
Well, it is heartbreaking news. It's news that one day we knew we would have, but we always hoped it would be delayed and would be some way away. It's very hard to take it in, that radiant smile which lights up a room and lights up a country is just not going to be live for us there anymore. Very hard to imagine. Most of the people in this country can remember nothing other than the Queen as monarch. Many of those who are elderly remember faintly the former king. But this is an enormous change for this country. It's a very big moment in history, a key pivotal moment. And I think there will be many tears shed tonight and over the next few days for Her Majesty the Queen.
I wonder, Sir John, given your interactions with the Queen, obviously as Prime Minister, what your personal recollections are of meeting her?
There are so many recollections, and in many ways so different from what people might imagine. The private meetings that the Prime Minister has with the Queen, which are perhaps scheduled for 45 minutes, in my experience never lasted remotely under an hour and often some way beyond it, which weren't entirely serious matters, just discussing the matters of the nation. There was a great deal of amusement in them. There was a great deal of humour in them. There was a bit of gossip in them. And apart from that, the serious matters that were discussed, I think people would have been extraordinarily surprised if they realised the depth of information the Queen had about the lives of people in every conceivable part of the United Kingdom. She was always extraordinarily well briefed. And on foreign affairs, of course, she would often say, if there was a difficulty of a foreign leader, well, I met him many years ago, or even I knew his father. There was always a wise word to be had. And those meetings with the Queen were one of the better parts of a Prime Minister's week.
I mean, that stability, that continuity that she brought, not just to the monarchy, I suppose, but to all of our lives, on being on the throne over such a long period. What are your thoughts on that now that she's passed?
Well, the continuity was very important, but I think there were other things as well. The example, the duty, the selflessness, the way in which other people were put first, the way in which she handled crisis with great stoicism when they occurred, as they occurred a number of times during her reign. They were all examples to people about how to behave in their own lives and examples for our country. And what you found going around the world is that the Queen was the face of the United Kingdom. When people around the world spoke of the Queen, they actually meant our Queen. That was the status she had in every part of the world. It was truly remarkable.
So, John, you talked about the stoicism she showed in times of crisis. We think back, of course, to 1992 and her Annus Horribilis speech, the fire at Windsor Castle as well. Her fortitude in dealing with those issues and those problems was something that the British people came to admire greatly in her, along with that sense of duty.
And in part because of her natural nature. She knew what one had to do to be a monarch. She knew when to keep out of controversy. She knew when to advise in private. She was almost faultless in the way in which she conducted the monarchy. And she leaves behind the monarchy in very good shape and a son who's been brought up to follow in precisely the same footsteps as King Charles III.
I wondered too, Sir John, about the affection with which she was held right around the world, particularly within the Commonwealth. And you travelled and you've seen the great affection that she had, and there will be millions across the globe now who will be particularly sad today.
Well, I have seen that affection at close quarters. Some 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was invited by the Queen to set up and chair the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Trust, a charity to commemorate her 60 years on the throne. And we raised money from across the Commonwealth, and I asked the Queen what she wished us to do with the money that we had raised in her name. And she gave us two tasks. The first was to cure avoidable blindness across the whole of the Commonwealth. And the second was to seek out young Commonwealth leaders in every nation of the Commonwealth, 54 at the time, and help prepare them for leadership roles in later life. It was entirely a selfless request on her behalf and entirely typical of her.
Remarkable. Sir John Major, thank you very much indeed for giving us your reflections on Queen Elizabeth II, who passed away today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
we're going to go to Buckingham Palace. There we are, live pictures there, the lights lining up the front, and crowds of people. A bit difficult to make out, but you can see your umbrella there, the rain still coming down, flashlights from people taking pictures, and of course, the press gathered there. And we're thinking around about a few hundred people, possibly even more, on the news that the Queen has died. That notice from Buckingham Palace announcing the news posted around about 6:40, 6:45 today, I think. The official announcement coming from Buckingham Palace that the Queen had died came just after 6:30, and it was after a RAF plane arrived on the tarmac at Aberdeenshire Airport to take members of the royal family to the Queen's bedside at Balmoral Castle. And these still the scenes, and you can see we've got a bit more light there now. You can see how many people have gathered. Quite a few, even with the rain pouring down there. Many people wanting to pay their respects, many people fearing the worst, of course, after that rather alarming bulletin from the Queen's medical team coming out of Balmoral in Scotland just after 12:30 today, saying that there was concern over the Queen's health, but that she was comfortable while she was in the castle. And of course, a good few hours later, we got the news that the Queen had passed away. The very latest scenes there, outside Buckingham Palace. Well, the Queen spent much of the past few years at Windsor Castle, of course, living and working there throughout the coronavirus pandemic. Our correspondent, Adina Campbell, is there for us now. Adina, we've just seen the pictures outside Buckingham Palace. Hundreds of people, probably thousands of people out there gathered. What is the scene like where you are?
Well, hundreds of people have gathered here in Windsor tonight. Nearby, close to the high street, others near the historic Long Walk. People of all ages, families have come out with young children, local residents, tourists have all come together to mark this day, and they've been paying their respects. Plenty have been leaving flowers. You may be able to see some of those floral tributes behind me, and others have lit candles. There was a poignant moment shortly after the announcement was made when a rainbow came out in the sky, and that's when people stood still. They were silent, they were reflective, and the news really then sunk in. And that happened shortly after the flag had been lowered, not quite at half-mast, but it had been lowered. This is a community that has had a deep, close connection with the Queen for many years. This was her main residence. She had spent a great deal of time here, particularly over the last 12 months, since she started experiencing those episodic mobility problems. And then, of course, she had spent a long time here with the Duke of Edinburgh before he died in April last year. They had been isolating here. People here are experiencing a sense of loss here tonight in Windsor. We've seen some emotional people who have been unable to hold back tears, consoling each other, hugging each other. And of course, we know that this is a town that has rich royal roots. Just recently, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have moved here. We know the Duke of Cambridge is up in Balmoral, but we know tonight the Duchess of Cambridge is looking after their 3 young children because they started their first full day at school. So this is a community in shock. They are sad, and it's a community in mourning.
Adina, thank you. Adina Campbell there outside Windsor Castle, perhaps the Queen's favourite residence, her main residence. And the scenes out there, of course, scores and scores of people paying their respects outside the building. Well, as we've been hearing, our new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, has led the tributes to Queen Elizabeth, saying she was loved and admired by people around the world, and describing her as the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our political editor, Chris Mason, is in Downing Street now. Chris, we know that there was a discussion in Parliament today over the appalling cost of living crisis. That news and that debate overshadowed by the situation concerning the Queen. And I wonder now, given the stability that the Queen not only brought to the rest of British society, but also to the political life of this country, that is now sadly gone.
It has, Clive, yeah. And I think what we witnessed at lunchtime, caught in a moment, the very nature of the British Constitution, the way that we are governed, because there in the House of Commons was a debate ongoing where the House of Commons does what it is famous for, that it is the fulcrum of our democracy. It is the fulcrum and apex of angry arguments to determine how we are governed. And there was that passionate argument going on about this whole huge and profound issue of energy bills, the government setting out its programme, the opposition criticising it, and then the passage of messages along the line, along the two front benches from a government minister, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, the leader, was on his feet at the time, and also to the Prime Minister. And you could tell, watching the chamber, you could tell the gravity of the news that was being passed on some 8 or 9 hours ago at lunchtime. The senior politicians learned of the deteriorating health of the Queen. We've seen and heard, haven't we, in the conversation you just had with Sir John Major, the reflections of senior politicians on the value that they attached to their conversations with the Queen, the nature of that constitutional settlement I was talking about, meaning that the Queen is, if you like, plugged into democracy, but stands above it. And through that mechanism of the weekly audiences, Prime Ministers, 15 in total, Liz Truss only having that one audience with the Queen, that moment 48 hours ago when she became Prime Minister, having the chance every week to go and see the Queen in private and tap into what David Cameron, one of her Prime Ministers, her 12th Prime Minister, saying this evening, was the world's greatest public servant and the world's most experienced diplomat, tapping into that wisdom and counsel, knowing whatever advice was offered would be done so privately.
Indeed. Okay, Chris, thank you, our political editor there, live at Downing Street. We're talking to Sir John Major a little bit earlier. The one of 15 Prime Ministers, of course, that the Queen interacted with, Liz Truss, the latest, whom she asked to become Prime Minister earlier this week. And if you're joining us for the first time, I should tell you that Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty died at Balmoral Castle in Aberdeenshire at the age of 96. Now, the Queen's eldest son, Charles, at the age of 73, has now become king. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and Queen consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. Following the death of his mother, His Majesty King Charles III released this statement. The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held. We've got live pictures for you coming in at Buckingham Palace. Again, that is the scene where it's a little bit difficult to make out, but there are many, many members of the public there paying their respects. They've been gathering throughout the day on the news a little after lunchtime of concerns of the Queen's health made by her medical team at Balmoral. Of course, the kissing of the hands, the ceremony in which the prospective Prime Minister assumes the position, had to take place at Balmoral because the Queen was unable to travel down to London. That was, of course, with Liz Truss earlier this week. And one assumes the reasoning behind her not being able to travel to London was part of the drama of events earlier on today. With those pictures, the very latest outside Buckingham Palace, where around 6:40 this evening, that notice was posted on the railings from Buckingham Palace, making it clear that the Queen had died peacefully. Well, the Queen was the longest serving monarch in the history of the United Kingdom and held a commanding presence in public life across the UK over 8 decades. Tonight, people have been reacting to the news of her sudden passing, and Lucy Manning has more.
She was long to reign over us, almost all of her life, and for most here, all of theirs. Through the streets of London they streamed to pay tribute to our Queen. What's your reaction to the news?
I'm so sad because she was a wonderful lady. She dedicated her whole life to the nation, and we could just thank her for it. And we feel for her family today. It's a very sad day.
I'm so sad because she was a lovely, beautiful lady, beautiful mother, a beautiful grandmother. She had many to takers for her. She was very much loved.
There is a real sense that this Queen was a history maker.
It's devastating. She's going to be missed by so many people. She affected so many lives, and she was an absolutely amazing monarch.
And what did she mean to you?
Well, I think as a woman, it's amazing to see a female at the helm of our country, and I might not ever get the chance to see another woman as Queen.
She meant everything to me, my family, a sense of community, loyalty, giving back to communities, serving, the community as a whole. So she meant a lot to everyone here today. I think, the biggest thing that I'll remember is, her sense of sort of charity, giving back. The crowds used to gather here in their hundreds of thousands to see the Queen on the Buckingham Palace balcony. As soon as her death was announced, they came back. There is a hush here, as the one constant in the country's life is no more. In the place where she died, Balmoral, the locals were enormously proud of their regal visitor who joined them each year.
Just very sad. She's been a monarch for over 70 years, and it's history, and we just wanted to be here to share our condolences to her, just part of it, kind of thing. Yeah.
It's really sad news to hear. Actually, it's that's the reason we came. We were hoping to pass on our regards, or just to be here. So it's kind of sad, actually.
Sad day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for everybody, I think. I think the whole nation will come together and just, feel the same. Yeah. Although you never knew her or anything, but her significance was just incredible. And it doesn't really hit home, I don't think, until you hear something like this, and what she meant to us and what she meant to the country. It was absolutely incredible legacy.
At Buckingham Palace, no one here truthfully is sure what to do, but they know they want to be here, to stand, to mark the moment, to bring flowers, to remember. Her kingdom is united in sorrow, yes, but also in admiration, in the sense that we have been fortunate to live in her era. Through change and turmoil, there has always been the Queen. Lucy Manning, BBC News, Buckingham Palace.
Lucy there talking about flowers marking the moment at Buckingham Palace. These are live pictures at Windsor Castle, and there, more floral tributes. Lit by a candle at the front there, as people remember. For many of them, the only monarch they've ever known. I began this broadcast a few minutes ago, pointing out that I've known no other queen at the age of 58, and those little children there. They're now going to be growing up in a world where it is Charles III who will be their sovereign. And people turning up continually throughout the evening as the light has dimmed The flashlights there in the corner there of some of the press who've recorded this moment as well, and continuing flowers being put down there as people remember. We're going to go back to Buckingham Palace too. I'll show you the live pictures there. In the darkness, hundreds of people, at least hundreds, but I suspect possibly even thousands, have gathered there now. And there they are. The rain's still coming down. It's been raining throughout the day, and despite that, people have been willing to deal with the elements. Their umbrellas there bobbing about in the wind, as many of them reflect on a life of extraordinary selflessness and grit to a degree through some of the trials and tribulations of her own family, it has to be said. And you can get a much clearer sense of the rain pouring down there in the lights outside Buckingham Palace, right in the heart of central London. Well, it was in Scotland where the Queen passed away, and political leaders there have been paying tribute to the monarch. In the last few minutes, Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, described the Queen's death as a profoundly sad moment, describing her life as one of extraordinary dedication and service. Let's go now to Sarah Smith at Holyrood in Edinburgh. Sarah, what else have you been hearing from the political establishment in Scotland?
Well, already people here are turning up at Holyrood Palace, the Queen's official residence in Edinburgh, with flowers to pay their respects, and we're hearing of their sorrow and sadness at the passing of Queen Elizabeth, and political leaders all joining in with that sentiment. And it's partly because the Queen had a really very obvious affection for Scotland, and that's one that was reciprocated by many, many people here. It was just last year at the opening of the Scottish Parliament, when Scotland's politicians were all gathered there together, that she talked to them of her deep and abiding affection for this wonderful country, she called it. And she spoke of the many, many happy memories her and Prince Philip had shared in Scotland. She came here frequently as a child before she was Queen, and her first official visit to Scotland as the monarch took place just 3 weeks after the coronation, when she and her husband came here to Edinburgh and toured through the streets, and he was, of course, the Duke of Edinburgh. And then in the decades since then, she was a very frequent visitor. Every summer, she would come and spend a week here at Holyrood Palace before going up to Balmoral. She would take part in all sorts of official engagements, including hosting every summer a garden party for thousands of Scots to be invited to it. And it's because of these connections that politicians here are saying that they feel so profoundly sad, like the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon.
For more than 70 years, Queen Elizabeth has been the great constant in our national life. She has inspired us, on occasion comforted us, and always personified values we hold dear. Throughout her reign, she performed her duties with exceptional wisdom, dedication, and fidelity. Scotland loved, respected, and admired her. And by all accounts, Her Majesty was really happier than when she was here in Scotland at her beloved Balmoral, a fact I have been privileged to observe personally. I hope it will be a source of comfort to her family that she spent her final days in a place that she loved so much.
Nicola Sturgeon there talking about the respect and admiration that she felt for the Queen, partly because of her affection for Scotland, but also because of her sense of service and duty. And that's why we're hearing politicians from all sides of the political spectrum absolutely agreed that they owe a great debt to the monarch who served the country so well for so very many years. I think it's notable here in Scotland as well that throughout the years of debate that there have been about Scottish independence, the SNP were always at pains to stress that the Queen would remain the head of state if Scotland ever were to become independent. That's because they feared it would be a vote loser if they were to suggest that an independent Scotland would cut ties with the royal family. That's a measure of the affection and the respect that the Queen was given here in Scotland.
Indeed, Sarah, thank you for that. Sarah Smith there at Holyrood, the Queen's official residence in Edinburgh. Actually, the Queen had more Scottish monarchs in her ancestry than English ones. So that's an interesting thought to ponder there. We're going to go to some more floral tributes being placed outside Windsor. This is the scene this evening. A few candles as well have been lit there. Windsor, perhaps the Queen's favourite residence and her main residence. We talked a little bit to Sir John Major about the Queen's fortitude and strength during that awful fire that engulfed the castle, and how she coped with that and simply got on with things. And it's that sense of duty and strength that has come to be admired by so many people throughout her long reign, and now will be sorely missed by many people, not just in this country, but quite frankly, right around the world. And more people there this evening. What time is it? 9:15, coming out. The rain has held off there. It's very rainy down in Buckingham Palace, but there, people still making and marking their respects to our departed Queen. And this is the scene outside Buckingham Palace tonight. As we've been seeing throughout the evening, many more people turning up there as well. Some people perhaps hearing the news for the first time and deciding that perhaps they need to do something that is important to them in perhaps laying flowers outside one of the official royal residences. And there, despite that rain teeming down, it's been bucketing it down for much of the day, frankly, but still, so many people have been wanting to get out there and mark this incredible moment in British history. And in Northern Ireland, leaders across the political spectrum have been paying their tributes to the Queen, praising her efforts to advance peace and reconciliation. Our Ireland correspondent, Chris Page, is live at Stormont for us now. Chris, just sum up what you've been hearing from those people who have been marking the Queen's death with their own messages.
Yes, Clive, here at Stormont, the home of the Northern Ireland Assembly, 2 flags are flying at half-mast on top of the building, and senior politicians have been expressing their condolences to the royal family and paying their tributes. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, has said Queen Elizabeth II was a steadfast and unshakable head of state. At the other end of the political spectrum, so to speak, the leader of the Irish Nationalist Party, Sinn Féin here, Michelle O'Neill, has said she learned of the Queen's passing with deep regret. For about 30 of the Queen's 70 years on the throne, Northern Ireland was perhaps the most troubled part of her realm, and the conflict known as the Troubles touched the Queen most personally and painfully, perhaps in 1979, when her cousin Lord Mountbatten was murdered by the IRA. Later, the Queen made some defining contributions to the peace process, most notably in 2011, when she became the first British monarch to carry out a state visit to the Republic of Ireland. A year later, there was another highly symbolic and powerful gesture when she shook hands with a former IRA commander, the late Martin McGuinness, who is a Sinn Féin politician, had become the joint head of the power-sharing devolved government. So I think it is those moments in particular that people in Northern Ireland will be reflecting on as they consider Her Majesty's legacy on this sad day over the coming days and, of course, for many decades to come.
Indeed. Okay. Chris, thank you for that. Chris Page there, our Ireland correspondent outside Stormont, joining us there. This is the scene back at Buckingham Palace. And the place where, at around 6:40 this evening, that notice was posted by the palace announcing the death of Her Majesty the Queen a few hundred miles further north in Scotland, of course, at Balmoral Castle. And more people, it seems, over the last, hour or so, have been turning up, and umbrellas in hand, in the middle of all that rain, to pay tributes to For many of them, the only monarch that they've ever known. And now, of course, we have a new king, and that is Charles III. He was, of course, the Prince of Wales, and the tributes there have come from the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, and we can bring in our correspondent, Howell Griffith, to talk to us now. Howell, just sum up, will you please, some of the thoughts of the leaders there where you are, and the thoughts of the people of Wales, not only on the passing of Her Majesty, but also, of course, the now Charles III.
Yes, well, I'm here at the Senedd, and we've seen people coming to lay flowers here too. The flags have been lowered. This is actually where the Queen made her final visit to Wales back in October last year. Opening the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, for the 6th time. She was a repeat visitor here. She opened what was then the First National Assembly back in 1999, lending, some people argue, a sense of legitimacy to this growing institution. The tributes to her, not surprisingly, maybe have been led by the First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, who spoke about an hour or so ago.
It is with great sadness that we learn today of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She has been the only monarch that most of us will remember, and today the country feels an immense loss. Throughout her long and exceptional life, as our longest reigning monarch, Her Majesty firmly upheld the values and traditions of the British monarchy. On behalf of the Welsh Government and people in all parts of Wales, I offer our deepest condolences to all Her Majesty's children and their families on this sad occasion.
Lots of people I've spoken to talking about how she oversaw a huge period of change in national life here in Wales, not just a new Senedd, but people saying she gave a sense of welcome to people of all nations and all faiths as she reigned for such a long time.
Howell, thank you for the Howell Griffith there outside the Senedd in Cardiff. Well, as we know, the Queen was not only the monarch for the United Kingdom, but she was also the head of state across 14 other Commonwealth countries. So, how has the news been received right around the world? Our diplomatic correspondent James Landale has been looking at the international response to the Queen's passing.
From the moment the Queen's reign began in Kenya in 1952, she played a constant and significant role on the international stage. And this afternoon there was sorrow and regret expressed around the world, including at the White House.
You know, our hearts and our thoughts go to the family members of the Queen, goes to the people of the United Kingdom, our relationship with the people of the United Kingdom. And this is something that the president has said himself has grown stronger and stronger.
The President of France, Emmanuel Macron, said Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth embodied the continuity and unity of the British nation for over 70 years. I keep the memory of a friend of France, a Queen of Hearts, who marked her country and her century forever. The Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, said Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth will be remembered as a stalwart of our times. She provided inspiring leadership to her nation and people. And the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said, "It is with deep sadness that we learned of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. On behalf of the Ukrainian people, we extend sincere condolences to the royal family, the entire United Kingdom and the Commonwealth over this irreparable loss."
As her 12th Canadian Prime Minister, I'm having trouble believing that my last sit down with her was my last. I will so miss those chats. She was thoughtful, wise, curious, helpful, funny, and so much more.
She was dubbed by one of her biographers as Queen of the World, visiting hundreds of countries throughout her reign. She was monarch of 15 separate realms, the head of a commonwealth of some 56 nations. So it was little surprise that news of the Queen's death made headlines around the world.
The Queen has passed away. The Queen died peacefully, the royal family says, at Balmoral this afternoon.
Throughout her reign, the Queen was a living embodiment of the transatlantic relationship, meeting no fewer than 12 US presidents. In a statement, President Biden described her as a stateswoman of unmatched dignity and constancy. Barack Obama said she'd reigned with grace, elegance, and a tireless work ethic. She listened deeply, he said, thought strategically, and was responsible for considerable diplomatic achievements. Views echoed on the streets of Washington.
I admire her greatly. Yeah, I'm so sorry that she's passed. I mean, she's an icon here, everywhere.
Horrible. I've been reading about her my whole life. She's one of the sane people in the UK, like the US, and that's just sad.
As head of the Commonwealth, the Queen nurtured and shaped a unique international organisation, binding together 2.5 billion people. And it was to a meeting of Commonwealth leaders that the Queen made her last overseas tour in 2015, visiting Malta, an island she'd once called home, the bookend of a life of duty and diplomacy on the international stage. James Landale, BBC News.
The global significance of the passing of the Queen. Well, joining me now is the author and broadcaster Giles Brandreth, a personal friend of Prince Philip and someone who's known the Queen for 50 years. Giles, it's always a pleasure to see you, but on this sad day,
It's a significant day. The reason so many people are turning out Buckingham Palace is because people feel the loss. For most people, this is the only sovereign they have known. And it's extraordinary to think that on Tuesday of this week, this woman who was sustained by faith, but driven by duty, was again doing her duty, saying goodbye to her 14th Prime Minister, welcoming her 15th Prime Minister, doing what she's been doing. And thinking of her new Prime Minister, I think Liz Truss was born in 1975, and her first Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, the only Prime Minister she ever called Winston, she always called the others more formally, but Winston, I think, was born in something like 1876. So that gives you a feel of the span of her extraordinary life. But I think the reason that she is being mourned across the world, even by people who don't rate monarchy, don't think monarchy is important in the modern age, is because of her quality as a person. She was undoubtedly our longest reigning sovereign, probably our most popular, certainly our most respected. Why? Because she had qualities that made her unique. Some kings and queens we remembered for the dramatic things that happened during their reign. Not so much this queen. The type of person that she was, her dedication to service was so exemplary. Her courtesy, her kindness, her good humor, and they never wavered. She was the same person. I mean, I was lucky enough to meet her when I was still a teenager. And certainly she was the same person consistently throughout her life. What made her so special, I don't know. She would, thank God, she would say that she had a blessed life, and her faith is what kept her going.
I think that's a really interesting and important point. That those personal qualities that she had, regardless of the crown on her head and the ermine and the fine jewels and so on, she was someone, you saw her in the line greeting people, you know, at some opening of some building or whatever. And there was a human, relatable touch that she had. And that quality seemed to imbue everything that she did and made her so accessible to millions of people. As I say, not just here, but in the Commonwealth as well.
She accepted her destiny. Yeah. She said at the coronation of her parents, which she attended, getting into the carriage, she wrote an account of it for her parents, that at first the carriage was quite jolty, but gradually we got used to it. And I think that's how she found being monarch. At first a bit jolty, but she got used to it. And she wasn't self-conscious about being the queen. She just accepted that. She was always herself. And I think the one aspect of her that maybe the public didn't see as much of as others who met her.
Hi guys, thank you all very much for your generous time, for staying, watching Morning with the Queen. and I have to continue my commitment to the channel on this family to talk about other situations that I've put as a communication to go live and say tonight. But at the same time, I'll join you in the next 2 minutes again, and we'll still continue to pay our respect to the Queen. But thank you all very much for watching so far, and I hope that everyone around the world would have heard the news and have at this point joining us to pay their respect to Her Majesty the Queen of England, who has rested in peace this evening. And I will continue to say, as I said before, long live the new King Charles III. And I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.